Welcome, folks, to another conversational Bible chat. And as you can see, I've got Dia with me once again. I had Dia last month for a rather interesting chat about marriage. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. Thanks for having me back.
It's an absolute pleasure, absolute pleasure. And um, as always, especially over the Easter period, there's always sort of various conversations going on over the internet and what have you else. Actually, I'm going to start with something that you're probably not prepared with. There was a tweet that you put out earlier today, which I
Oh,
found quite interesting, actually. What do you call a black person who wears a wig, a blonde wig?
yeah, just that it seems to be such a crime when a person says they want dreadlocks, a white person decides that they want to spray tan or whatever it is, and the leftist black community, I should emphasize, not like right-leaning conservative black people, but the left-leaning black community and act like that's akin to some form of supremacy and that like you're doing something really, really evil, cultural appropriation. So why is it that when Beyonce does it or when Nicki Minaj wears a blonde wig, why is it that when a black person does it, it's perfectly allowed, but when a white person does it, they're demonized? I was just calling a spade a spade. I don't like contradictions.
To be honest with you, until I saw your tweet, I'll try to get it up on the screen whilst we're talking. But until I saw your tweet, I hadn't even realised that was an issue. However, I will say, um, I have come across the works of people like Dr. Umar. Have you ever heard of him, Dr. Umar?
I haven't. I
Dr.
don't think I
Umar
have
Johnson.
anyway.
Dr. Umar Johnson, I believe his name is. He actually believes that black people should be married to other black people, and
Sure,
and so on and
that's
so, and so on and so forth, all over the place.
I'm
Anyway.
of the opinion, and I think you already know this is not a secret, but for your viewers who are not familiar with me, I'm of the opinion that if someone is for nationalism of their own ethnic race, that's not technically racism because they're not calling for the genocide of a group of people. They're simply saying, I think white people should be with white people, and I think Latino people should be with Latino people. It's not an incitement of violence. I'm okay with that point of view. What I'm not okay with is when people decide that it's worthy to intervene and make it a big deal and make it personal and impose it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with having that consciousness. If a black person wants to date a black person, they should be allowed to do that. There's nothing wrong with preservation. What
Right.
is wrong is when you make someone feel badly about having fallen in love with someone of the opposite race, because there's nothing wrong with that either. I just happen to be okay with people having the opinion that it's okay to date within their own race. That's considered supremacy now, but it isn't.
I mean, it's an interesting conversation because this reminds me of a documentary that you did a few years
Mm,
ago. Right. Okay. So before we
yeah.
go back to that documentary, here's the thing. So I understand your take, okay? And look, and I appreciate that you didn't know I was going to be talking about this. This wasn't what
No.
I planned. I saw your tweet and I thought, wow, okay, we really should touch on it. So here's the thing. I sit right in the middle of two polarized camps. One camp, for example, people like Stephen Wells, who all believes, white people should be with white people, so on and so forth. And then I've got Dave's camp, a good friend, the Dave I'm talking about, who believes basically, again, like Dr. Umar Johnson, that black people should be with black people. Right. Now, I want to refer
Whereas
to the.
I'm in the middle too.
I mean, yeah, we're
I'm,
both in the middle. We're
I'm in the
both
middle
in the
with
middle.
you.
I actually believe that these polarized camps are doing the devil's work in the sense of his aim is just to divide us. And also it's not biblical because if you go to Galatians 3:28, and I quote, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither
Great
slave nor
gentleman.
free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Jesus Christ. So right there, as far as Jesus Christ is concerned, we are all one. We are all equal. But that, that doesn't mean to say it doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't we don't need to lose our racial or ethnic identities. We don't need to do that if we to follow Christ. But certainly to believe that one is better than the other or one is lesser than the other, I think that's where I believe that your Dr. Umar Johnsons and those who are the white race supremacists, I think that's where they get it wrong. Let me just remind folks of what we are going to be talking about today. So in our last discussion with regards to why is it that women are now not choosing marriage as their first option, but instead are preferring to delay being married and instead actually even choosing careers and choosing employment. I have since then taken that subject a stage further, and I've been looking at the issue as it pertains to how the dating game has created something of anomaly, which is what do you do now when most people prefer sex outside of marriage? And so I put up a video on the YouTube channel. That's this one here. Women do not prefer virgins. So, and then I've sort of extended that to, will Christian men need 50 relations before marriage to find the one? So I had a few comments from people who totally agreed with me. Well, I mean, in essence, they hadn't actually realized the seriousness of the situation. So for those of you who are just coming onto this subject in the first instance, let me just give some background. As I said before, on most relationships are now started off through dating apps, which, in fairness, from my opinion, they're there to basically program humanity. They're there to program us into a set of responses so that we're conditioned in a specific way. I think in the last discussion with Dia, I did say that, well, it's created something of a Pareto effect where, because of the way the apps work, women are now being conditioned to be attracted to just a small percentage. In fact, Tinder stated recently that now women swipe right at only 1% of the male profiles. I mean, and that's shocking. But so what that has done now, that's literally created an atmosphere where we've now got a state where we've got relationships that are based on superficiality, instant gratification, and basically sexual exploits over commitment, loyalty, trust, and, the ability to look for people who can perform roles, the key roles within relationships, which is, can you perform the role of a man as a provider and protector, and can you provide the role of a wife, a nurturer, and someone who's going to oversee the looking after kids and that. So effectively the nature of the family has changed, but then so has dating has changed now. In this video, what I did was I had a look at we had a look at what the Red Pill was saying about the current dating landscape. People like, say, for example, Fresh and Fit, a very well-known content provider on YouTube, and people like Andrew Wilson have been saying that the average guy now needs to be dating or needs to have experience with at least 50 women. And that's because the average woman from the age of 18 is probably far more sexually active and access to, to dates and whatever else than her male counterpart. With respect to what Fresh and Fit is saying, which is because most women don't find most men attractive, and they've got this variety of choice. Men are finding it very, very difficult to secure a date. And even if they do, they're finding that most women will flake on them. So they're saying you're going to have to date about and have sexual relationships, in fact, with about 50 women before you can find the one. I mean, that's pretty controversial.
I don't know if 50 is correct, but I sadly, the statistics from male to a female ratio is different from female to male ratio.
Right.
So if that's what a man has to do to find a good quality woman who's not a whore, but is attractive and has all the value systems that you would want, it's sad that 50 is the number. But I've often been told by people, if you want to find a good man and you want to be married quickly, you need to date like it's a full-time job.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So okay. So it's not just
So,
even
yeah.
it's not even just one way. It's actually both ways now. If you're a
Well,
man,
I mean, I
yeah.
wasn't told a number. You said 50.
I actually think that's an arbitrary number that they just threw out there. What they were trying to say
Maybe,
is you're going.
maybe.
Okay. So this is where we're gonna get even more controversial. So here's the thing. One of the reasons why they reckon it's a high number, and this is where we're going to need you to confirm this, just from your opinion, obviously. But they feel that a guy who hasn't had much experience with women is a bit of a turn off for most women.
But that's because the experiences that they have, it should be with a singular woman, and it should happen very young. Like back in the day, when a man and a woman got together, it was one with one. The woman will get pregnant relatively quickly. Whereas we're living in a day where we're living in an era where men are labeled as simps or incels or whatever it is. Like having sex is like, oh, like riding a horse. It becomes this thing. Like there's a whole movie based on it, the 40-year-old virgin. And then they're talking about how he has to have a lot of sex until he becomes, at least mediocre about it, because he can't just start dating the woman that he actually likes. If you date the woman that you actually like, she's not going to want to be with you.
But is that true?
Yeah.
Though? I want to hold you to that. But be honest, in the modern day, forget about tradition now. Between you, your friends, and I'm not talking about just Christian ones, right across the board in culture. Is that true that if a man isn't good sexually, I mean, is that important?
I think it is maybe not necessarily to me, because I would be in a similar category, but to the friends that I talk to, when like they talk about the times that they like go down on a guy or vice versa, or like you have those conversations with your girlfriends. I sort of sit there listening and learning, but they do, and they have a laugh about, oh, and he was just so bad. All he wanted to do was foreplay, but when it came to the sex, he was so bad at sex. And yeah, like it is. It's a turn off for women. It truly is.
Go back to what you said earlier, and I'm going to address the viewers. I mean, Dia mentioned that back in the day, it was literally a one-on-one situation. More than likely, the first person that you fell in love with, 18, 19 years of age, you ended up basically marrying that person. There wasn't no, and by the way, you actually didn't have, more than likely, you didn't have sex until after you were married. It just wasn't the thing. So have we got to this point? Okay, it's gone back to what I was saying before about the dating game and the apps. They've created this new programmed response now where we engage in an activity for which now even women have been conditioned into thinking, well, hang on a second, you value sexual experiences now, which invariably puts us in this, men anyway, in this, well, it puts us in a position where you've got to be good at it. But of course, how can you be good at it unless you've had experiences, so to speak?
You have to practice.
You have to practice. Women would have had that practice from an earlier age.
Unfortunately, yeah.
How much of it is a real deal breaker?
I think for the modern woman it probably is. I don't think it is for a woman seeking a man of good values. But a man can have good values and even be good looking, but still be really, really stupid. Like he has to have emotional maturity. Like there's a lot that needs to be there. But you were talking about the apps earlier. The apps don't just do what you said. They also create the notion in sort of the zeitgeist that um that they are disposable. Because anytime someone breaks up with someone, we sort of default to the thought, oh well, there's plenty of fish in the sea. There's even a dating site called Plenty of Fish. And I understand that that's meant obviously as kind words to console someone in that moment. That's fair enough. But 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 it just, one, it's not completely true, and two, it removes the value of the person and you as well.
Well, absolutely right, because it gives the illusion of choice. And if you know you've got choice, well, you don't have to work hard at it. If it's not what you want, well, I mean, you can just go and get another one. There's plenty of fish, as
Yeah,
they say.
yeah,
Wow.
like yeah, it's sad.
So, okay, so guys, I mean, as you can see, that in itself. Remember that this is a game, by the way. They've got to, so once they've got us out of the traditional model and into the dating game, where all these new and arbitrary parameters and prerequisites are now in place. And as Dia says, which I hadn't actually considered, this illusion of choice, making relationships disposable. So hence, if a guy's not suitable sexually, or a woman's not suitable sexually, hey, you can just go and get another one. You can
But
just get
it's more the other way around. I think women suffer more not to become a feminist on the issue because you know me, I am not a feminist by any means. But I do believe that the more women haul themselves around and continue to have sex from the age of 13 and have more sex in their life than a woman at 50, it is going to be worse for those particular women.
Oh, I
It will
totally
be
agree with
worse.
you. I came across.
Yeah,
Okay. So look,
what worse?
I came across. It was this, and I will add it to this video. It was a discussion on the Whatever podcast. I'm not sure whether you've seen that podcast, the Whatever podcast.
I've seen snippets for sure. Yeah,
Right.
with Matt
Okay.
Walsh and Charlie Kirk.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen. So Brian, who hosts the show,
Yes.
he questioned a woman about, she was in her early 30s, about why she was recently divorced. And her response was every man's nightmare. This basically, her response said everything about why men today fear marriage. Because essentially,
Sure.
what happened was very much like you said. She'd obviously been having sex from quite an early age, and that, but it was with all the wrong people because you pair bond with the wrong people, basically. Do you know what I'm saying? And she said the best sex she
She's
had
not
was,
pair bonding. She's
well,
not
no,
giving
she's
her
not
body a
pair bonding. Yeah, you're
pair
right.
bond
You're right.
anyway.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, what had happened was, dear, she had unfortunately had sex with this one guy who was it wasn't good for her, but she could never get this guy out of her head. So now when she
Okay.
eventually met a good guy, her husband, the sexual experience that she had with the guy with this guy a few years before left such a mark on her. This is what she said. She said the guy had actually destroyed me. I couldn't tell my husband. I couldn't tell him why he wasn't able to satisfy me. But it got so bad.
But when
I
you
had,
had,
yeah. She said it got so bad. I had to divorce him. Now they got two kids and whatever else. And
oh,
the look on Brian's face
that's
was like,
mad.
oh my God. Because in that situation, he said to her, let me make this clear. Was he a good guy? Yes. Did he provide for the family? Yes. Was he loving towards you? Yes. So this is a guy who had everything, but because she'd had that sexual experience,
Just comparing.
was comparing. So
Yeah.
when people
It's
say,
far better when you have nothing to compare.
well, you see, here's the thing. listen to what Dia just said. It's better if you don't have anything to compare. Now,
Yeah, because then you'll always just know what you know.
well, as weird as that seems, it's not until you look at that guy's situation that you realize why that is so important. But look, you know what? In defense of women who say, well, why would you want to be in a relationship, in a marriage where pretty much the sex is bad? Is there any way out of that?
But how do you know? What do you mean with a whore, or do you mean with
No,
one-on-one?
well, but let's say you're now in a committed relationship, and the wife basically has gone, well, she's not been able to be satisfied because previous to her marriage, she had at least one other experience that she deemed was fulfilling. But unfortunately, her current husband, he's not cutting it. Is there any way out of that?
Well, I don't think you should compare anyway. The Bible tells us not to compare. Like, I compare my body, my physical body. I'm like, oh, I wish I looked like that. I wish I had the skin of the girl over there, and I wish I had the stomach of that girl over there. And I was listening to a podcast, a Christian podcast, by a Christian that I really like. Her name is Candace Cameron Bure. And it's called the Candace Cameron Bure podcast. She used to be on a show called Full House, and then she went on Fuller House. And anyway, one of the episodes was about how we really shouldn't compare ourselves to other bodies, other people, because doing that, it's a form of coveting. And when you covet, you make your own life sort of worse because you get in your own head.
What do you mean by coveting? Just for those who aren't familiar with that
Oh,
term.
so one of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. So basically, thou shalt not have envy. Thou shalt not have desire for things that are not yours.
Right.
And when you do that, you're hurting yourself. You're hurting your self-esteem. You're hurting God because you're not seeing the blessings around you. So applying that to our current discussion, it's not a good idea to compare a previous sexual partner to a current sexual partner.
Right.
And even if you've just had one prior one in the hypothetical that you gave us, one prior one, and then what is a husband like? What's the wife to do? Like, don't compare them. Pretend the other one didn't exist. Like,
well, I mean, ideally, this wouldn't even be an issue. This wouldn't have been an issue if you'd waited to be married before having sex anyway. Do you see my point there?
For sure, that's it. But you can have sex outside of marriage. It's not ideal, and I wouldn't recommend it, and I would choose the biblical way. But you don't have to be a whore about it. Like, you can have maybe 3 sexual partners, and then you marry partner number 4. That's still relatively respectful. Whereas today, it's like one partner a month. I don't know, like situationships and
oh yeah, it's got crazy.
Like, I think that 15 or 20-year-old has far more sexual experience than me.
A 15 to 20-year-old girl now has definitely got access to more sex than her male counterpart. That's for sure. Just because of the way the dating game has worked out. And as you say, be comparing, that's pretty high. And actually, dear, I didn't even look at it from that point of view, but you're absolutely right. But also, do you know what that does? It brings me on to another issue that we'll have to come back and talk about another day. I'm going to do a video about this. Plastic surgery. False eyelashes, lip fillers, BBLs, breast implants. I mean, it's literally gone off the scale.
I think when you get this dysmorphia, well, when you start to get these procedures, it's almost like you get blind to how far you're taking it, and until, like, she might look in the mirror and not see it as extreme.
Almost certainly does.
Certainly. Because it's been gradual process for her. She's upgraded each feature one by one. Whereas you meet her in real life and it's like jarring.
Well, that was the thing, that people were comparing the photo from 8 years ago to the photo now. But it's the question, when did you get old, or when did you get fat, or when did you get whatever? Well, one day at a time. One procedure at a time, one lip filler appointment at a time.
Yeah, it's true. And then social media, I think, is a big part of that, again, because it's the algorithm, one step at a time. So firstly, you get an ad for lip fillers, and then it's like, oh, well, if you've had lip fillers, you might want to even it out with a nose job. And then if you get a nose job, you probably want to get, and it just goes on and on.
Well, that actually, someone actually who works in the business actually said to me that, believe it or not, whereas we thought it was the older women who were doing this, like to halt the aging process, it's actually now that girls as young as 12 years old were having issues with their body because the social media apps, like the filtering apps, which you can now use to make your body into, something better, whatever else.
Pretty, better skin.
Right. So, and I didn't, I hadn't even considered that whole industry and the whole push by these companies pushing for, plastic surgery and this and that and the other was actually going against the Bible. Can you just go through that again for us? So you're saying that that's actually a sin to be comparing yourself with another.
Yeah, because it's envy. Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins. Or if you just look at the 10 Commandments, it's coveting. I do it all the time. I look at like the Instagram of someone like Jessica Alba, and I'm like, oh, she's Latina like me, but I don't have, her big beautiful lips. I don't have her amazing complexion. There's so much about her I don't have. Like, she doesn't have my massive eyes. Like, but like we each have our strengths. And that's what we sort of need to learn. But yeah, it is. It's a sin to desire to the point of which you hate yourself for not having what the other person has. Definitely.
That is amazing. So I'm definitely going to be exploring that in more detail because, again, these are the programmed responses now that essentially have destroying humanity. Programmed responses that clearly go against, God's commandment, which was there to protect us from this type of thing, So, moving back onto the final part of this discussion, which related to Christian men. So, because my understanding is that, unfortunately, you could be forgiven for believing that, well, as a Christian guy, well, you can get yourself a Christian girl in the church and you're good to go. Not the case. Not the case because most Christian women don't find Christian men attractive. Can you explain that?
Well, I mean, I don't know whether most Christian women don't find Christian men attractive. I wouldn't put it that bluntly, but I will say that the men that claim to be Christian still commit sexual immoralities.
Right.
Just like the women do.
Right.
And there are genuine women, like a very good friend of mine, skinny, beautiful. She had a boyfriend for a time, and she didn't like that he kept trying to be sexual with her. It wasn't something that she wanted, and she was like, "Are you a Christian? Like, what are you doing?"
Right.
And it was off-putting to her, and they had to break up. And that's the opposite of what you and I are currently talking about.
Right.
But there is this thing. I think Australian Christian men, and I could be wrong, but I think Australian Christian men are not gun carriers. They're not. They don't work out. They're like, it's like when I think of a masculine Christian man, I think of like a Texan, a tree chopper, or like a cowboy, or something like that. But masculinity today is sort of lost. Like, there was one of the patients that came into work. I'm a dental assistant by trade, for those who are wondering what I'm talking about. And he was a like 25-year-old Asian male, and he sort of laid his hands like this, and he's a man, and I'm like, and he wasn't like effeminate in that he was feminine, but that's just, there's something off-putting about a guy that's like that, a feeble, weak, meek kind of man. It's not attractive.
But I suppose in his defense, though, isn't that the kind of man that feminists and these woke leftists, governments are
I
pushing.
don't think so. They say that that's what they want, but at the end of the day, if a war was to come, they would want the masculine hero men to look out for them. Not to say that some of those feminists aren't thought consistent. Maybe some of those feminists really do want a guy that they can belittle a bit and treat small. I'm sure some of those women exist that really do want those sort of feeble kind of men. But I would say that most women be excited by the concept of a guy that pays for the date, a guy that's protective, a guy that has your back, a guy that's a real man. I would say that most women, minus the ones that have been brainwashed, be okay with a real masculine guy.
Okay, all right. Okay, so my question now, or my next set of questions, they're basically, I believe, the kind of questions that, Christians who have left, Christian men who have left the church, because I'm only going to be able to speak from the vantage point of a Christian man, and you're going to speak from the vantage point of a Christian woman. So here's what I'm going to say. Okay, so let's just say a guy today is thinking, do you know what? I need to get myself back in church because, in fairness, yes, I want to get closer to God, but also I'd like to find myself a partner. Is it true though that the Christian woman is still going to be looking for the same character traits as a Christian, as a non-Christian woman? In that, he would still have to be experienced sexually or in the dating game. Otherwise, they just won't find that guy attractive.
I think an authentic Christian woman who is saved really does want a guy who is saved and hasn't had sex. But a conservative person, female, probably would want a guy that has had a little bit of experience.
Okay.
And then, people who have no morality when it comes to sex would want a guy that's had a lot of sex because they've had a lot of sex. And they want a guy who can rock their world.
Right. Okay.
Those, I think, are the three categories.
Right. Okay. So I like the fact that you broke it down into three categories there, basically. Yeah, you're right. So you've got you've got a Christian worldview, conservative Christian worldview, and then the secular view is essentially what you're saying.
Pretty much, yeah. I would take out the Christian for the middle one. I would say conservative doesn't always equal Christian.
Okay. And essentially then you're presumably you'd be looking at someone who doesn't necessarily have to have 50 people or plethora of experience. Because one of the reasons why I asked this question is because when you look at the divorce figures amongst Christians, that's pretty high as well.
It's sad. It's quite unexpected.
And again, when you look at the reasons, well, exactly, yeah. But when you look at the reasons as well, not being sexually. In fact, actually, I seem to remember. I'm going to add her to this video as well. I think I had her in one of my earlier videos. Oh, actually, no, I did. I added her to the last video. I don't know whether you actually saw that. The last discussion that we had, I saw it. Right. Okay. Do you remember? Okay. She was a female pastor. She She had a loving family and what have you else. And then what happened was, she basically thought, no, I'm not expressing myself sexually. So she's divorced her husband. She left the church, divorced her husband, and she became a pornographer on OnlyFans.
Oh, wow. No, I don't remember that. I would remember. I would remember.
I would suggest, if you haven't seen that, guys, I would seriously suggest you go back to the last, where was it? Yeah, it was the last video on the channel. But yeah, so that's an example actually of, what you'd expect where you'd expect a Christian woman to have, pretty much high ideals. And quite frankly, so I think this was it. It was this one here. So yeah, I added a clip of a woman who, as I say, she was a female pastor.
I've been an adult content creator for 3.5 years now. I am now a millionaire due to my adult content creation. I was trained to be a pastor for 3 years, and then I pastored for a year. When I was in my late 20s, I went to a church that allowed female preachers. What a concept. Married a man, had 3 kids with him, never thought to question it. And then it was in my early 30s that I realized, oh my gosh, I'm queer. And that became a catalyst that changed my entire life.
Well, the problem with, I mean, as soon as I heard the words female pastor, I was already like, that's already unbiblical. That's already stupid. I'm fine with female ministers
Right.
if they are a married couple, and so then she's sort of working under the godhead of the husband. And I'm okay with female ministers if they're like doing Sunday school, or if they're assisting in the church at some capacity, or if they're just doing an introduction. Like, women have a place. But yeah, that woman just sounds like a moron, and the fact that she was a female pastor and had her own ministry, that's already unbiblical.
Oh, I mean, look, she had her own doctrine. As far as I'm concerned, she literally had her own doctrine. And you know what? Here's the thing. When the enemy gets a hold of you, especially those of us in the church, and pulls us away, I mean, he really does pull away. I mean, she became, you know, sort of polyamorous and whatever else. I mean, it was crazy, absolutely crazy. But look, okay, so I mean, there's some really interesting points to finish off, and I'd like to make sure that we finish off on a positive note. So, all things being what they are, for a new couple or a Christian who are deciding, do you know what? No, we want to do things properly. Okay, what would you suggest? How do they overcome, you know, all the societal pressures and whatever? And try and ensure that their marriage lasts beyond the 7-year average? What would you suggest?
Read your Bibles, pray together as a couple, do a Bible study once a week together as a couple, read devotionals together, and don't do screen time. Like, especially if you're married with kids, make sure your kids aren't on devices, and, you know, go for walks, do things as a family, go on a hike together, go trampolining, go do indoor rock climbing. The more you foster family relationships, the more you see your husband as a father and as a man, as your provider, and he will see his woman as a mother, as a nurturer, as a sidekick. My best friend isn't a Christian. Her name is Melanie. I've mentioned her to you. They're driving around Australia. They grow their own food. They make their own produce. They feed their kids like 100% grass-fed meats. They live also. Yeah, I think also what you're putting inside your body could affect things in some sort of negative, demonic way that we don't even think about. But yeah, I think read your Bibles, pray together as a family, read to your kids bedtime stories, let them be Bible stories, and yeah, limit screen time. Like, you know, make your kids write like fictional stories, like get the you know, go gardening. Yeah, I just think that you need to force that time. Like, we get so lazy. I certainly get lazy. I'm not married. But we get so lazy, we just want to watch television or whatever it is rather than getting outside. I walked today for 2 hours just listening to a podcast, a Christian podcast. So, you know, it's just about sort of finding that time with God and being in the moment and present. And married couples need to do that.
Just before you go, the other thing that just came to mind was this. I mean, how do we navigate the fact that, look, as Christians, we know we have an enemy that is looking to break up family? I mean, that's what all this is about, really, isn't it? The gamification, you know, the causing us to covet, you know, wanting us to be something other than what we were before. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I hadn't even considered that as another weapon that the enemy is using. So, given that we understand that there is an enemy doing everything possible to get us at that, what would you suggest in the way of awareness for a young couple, or for any Christian couple going into marriage?
Well, I think any negativity that comes your way, all of a sudden, you have this foreign alien thought that comes to your head. It happened to me the other day. The other day, I was watching a Disney movie, which is something that I do in my spare time because I'm a loser. I like watching animations, whatever. I think I was watching Sleeping Beauty, one of the old Disney films, and suddenly I had this weird desire to want to start watching pornography. And
Wow.
that didn't come from me. That was a weird outside thought, and I'm like, that's so random. That's so stupid. Why the hell, while watching a movie about a princess who was being raised by 3 fairies, would I decide that I suddenly want to start watching pornography? It was so out of nowhere. And so I think when those things happen, you need to yell. I said, I rebuke you, evil spirits, in the name of Jesus. So I think you need to recognize those thoughts as not being yours. They're trying to implant something evil in you.
Wow. Well, I can tell you something, right, guys? I wasn't expecting Dear to say that, and I'll tell you why. I treat what you.
I won, by the way. I didn't watch
Good,
porn.
great. Wait,
but I'm also
done.
not going to sit here and say that I've never watched porn.
Well, look. Here's the thing.
I'm freaking human, but in that moment, I didn't.
You said something there that's basically triggered a memory of something that I came across a few years ago. So okay. So as you know, and some of you may not know, this is not my first podcast. I used to do a podcast called Planned Illusion. These are over 100 episodes, and it was more sort of conspiratorial. And I would sort of interview experts around the world on the various methods of attack on the human race. And one of them was, and I've got to be very, very careful what I say because I realize it's YouTube. But suffice to say, I had an expert on there who truly believes there was certain weaponry that has been used to literally infiltrate the thoughts, and they wouldn't probably know this, but infiltrate the thoughts using certain frequencies and implant pornographic thoughts into the brain, literally. And actually, what this particular person said, I happen to know, had a certain amount of credibility because I knew of a very popular researcher at the time, an independent researcher called Deborah Tavares, who warned that, in years to come, there would be weaponry that could, using mind control techniques, could implant pornographic thoughts into our head. So when you sit and look, here's the thing, I have discussions with other guys who are literally trying to fight, watching porn or whatever else. And I've often thought, are these thoughts really our thoughts? And when you've just said that, I'm wondering, I'm beginning to think, well, clearly they're not. Because as you said, it just came out of nowhere, didn't it?
It did for me. Yeah, and I've had worse thoughts that came into my mind that were not mine. I won't repeat them here, but the porn one was probably the nicest one I've had of the things that I've had. But some of them were that, you'd be better off not being here. Why, if you weren't on Earth, so I never had the tendency, I should clarify, I've never had the tendency to hurt myself. But the thought came in my head, it'd be easier if you weren't around. And I know that's not me, because I'm generally speaking, you've known me a number of years now, I'm relatively upbeat. Very rarely am I in some sort of slumpy sadness. Surely it happens, but it's pretty rare.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, guys.
It was a demon.
Right. What I'm going to do, guys, look, because I'm very, very, I'm conscious of the fact that there are certain things, you can't put on YouTube. So I'm going to do 2 versions of this when I put this out. There's going to be the version that would just be, politically correct. But what I'll do, I'm going to set up a Patreon whereby there will be an extended version of this video that will include evidence that what Dee is saying about implanted thoughts isn't just some sort of, wild conspiracy, that there is a considerable amount of science and proof, okay, by way of experiments.
Mine was funny.
Right.
Mine was funny. I don't know about the science.
No,
Mine was a
you don't know.
demonic.
But what I'm trying to say, dear, is I do know about the science, and I will be adding it
Sure.
to. I'll be adding it to this
Sure.
video, but I will have to put it through Patreon. Yeah, I
Sure.
have to put it through Patreon, because otherwise it's just going to get taken down. But look,
Sure.
to cap it all off, what I will say is, thanks, dear, once again for coming on the show. We'll get her back on in the next few weeks. But what I'm going to say is this: look, we got to understand that basically everything about our world is now a conditioned program response for us to fail.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to fail, then indeed. So if you don't want to fail, then you're going to have to be intentional about what it is you want. If you want to be married, you want to be in a committed relationship, then you've got to know you have to do. Look at the things that Thea suggested, because I think they're really, they're things that are positive, that will help you to stave off negativity. Praying, she's absolutely right. You mentioned as a couple, reading your Bible, 100%. As Christians, these are the things you want to do. And by the way, if you're a non-Christian looking at this and you want to be married, look, maybe you should consider becoming a Christian, getting protected by the blood of Christ. Trust me, because if what myself and Dear are saying is true, you're not going to survive without that protection. The enemy's got too many weapons against us. I mean, imagine that. Mind control. Come on. Dating apps that kind of skew your proclivities, skew how you covet. I mean, come on. You are not going to fight that off by yourself. So on that note, folks, I'm going to, call it. There's a lot of information for you to take in. Dear, thanks so much. You look really healthy, by the way. Look forward to
to our walk.
You know what? Walks and talks, reading the Bible.
Cheap exercise. Just go for it. Get outside, go for a walk. Oh, okay, so let's end on this thought. A lot of people wonder why they have depression and all of that. My naturopath told me something I've never forgotten. If you are outside more than 5 minutes a day, that will change your entire mood. That'll make you happy. So if you're just enclosed and hibernating in your bedroom watching TV, that's I mean, you can do that, that's fine. But if you do that all the time without ever stepping outside, that actually can affect your mental health. 5 minutes a day outside will make the world of difference, just as a starting point for someone who thinks that they're sad and depressed. 5 minutes outside a day, just start there.
Well, you heard it from Dia. I think that's great advice. And on that note, I'm going to bid everyone farewell. Thank you so much, Dia. Really great to have you on for this episode. And I know I sort of hit you with a few topics that I should have warned you about. But listen, great stuff.
Cultural appropriation? That was not on the agenda.
That was not on the agenda.
It wasn't.
It's all good, and you handled it well. So once again, just as a reminder, guys, there's going to be 2 versions of this. I'm going to have to set up a Patreon where I can add on the supplementary information that you can get access to. So if you're a Patreon subscriber, you get access to that. Until then, guys, I bid you farewell. May God bless you all. Take care. Goodbye, dear.